Well, hey, everybody, thanks for coming back to the CEO for Life Experience podcast. And I am here with Miss Margo. And Margo, I just want to tell you how I found Margo was her title is the CFO queen, right? So anyone who puts CFO together with being a queen, I said I have to talk to this person. So Margo, thanks for being on the podcast.
You're so welcome. I'm
So,
excited to be
so
here as
Awesome. Hey, so anyone that's listening, the reason why I wanted to have Margo on and share her story with us and talk a little bit about the CEO for Life is that she exemplifies everything that we talk about in the book. Is that she's a leader. She also has tremendous self awareness from what I can see and what she puts out into the world. She's extremely technical capable, but she also knows and wants to give to the world. So, Margo, maybe you can lead us off a little bit with your story and how you ended up being the CFO queen, and we'll go from there.
well. Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for listening. Excited to have you all today. And I'm excited to share with you my story and to be able to really tell you all the things from my experience. I started when um, I was in college around my third year, where I saw an opportunity on the wall in accounting. At the time, it was bookkeeping, actually, for a designer. And I was like, how cool would it be if I could work for that guy? And growing up, life was really hard. My family did not have a lot of money. My parents worked really, really hard. And, these days it's more about quality than working hard, but there it was really hard. And I just felt like there had to be more to a dollar than what it was really seeming to be. And in school, things were just like you were judged because of what clothes you wear or what car, and all those sorts of things. And it didn't feel too good for too long. And when that opportunity came in, I was like, okay, I'm gonna apply. And it was a famous designer, Joseph Abud, and he did say yes. And behind the scenes, I was like, why would he say yes? And all of these things were happening, but he did say yes. And throughout that journey, I just kept moving along with it. And I knew from motherhood that watching other people that it was going to be tough, especially wanting a career and raising my children. So my inspiration was wanting to be around for my kids, but yet setting a really high example for them. And through the power of numbers, I really have created myself a career and tried to, I think I did actually, make accounting fun for my clients and for my following and all of my wonderful listeners.
So tell us a little bit about the journey of, so obviously there's a couple things to unpack there. And one of those is, you had tremendous self-awareness. You knew the environment you were in, you knew what you wanted to, you had respect for where you were, but you knew you wanted to try and take some risks, calculated risks. And so what kind of, anyone that's listening, let's talk a little bit about obstacles. I mean, was it just in your mind that you were just going to go do this thing, or I'm sure there were some obstacles. What were the obstacles and how did you overcome? You need some advice for people.
Oh, so there was huge obstacles. In the community I grew up in the Sephardic Jewish community, everything was about male dominant. So I feel
Mhm.
like I was in a woman's body in a man's world. And especially in the accounting field, when the typical path is to go in the top accounting firms and go work 60, 70 hours until 2, 3 in the morning, that's really all the things that I was seeing. In my head, it was kind of like, oh my God, how much are you spending? Oh my God, you can't do that. And a lot of, body pain, but I got used to the body pain and the freeze, but yet still acting in order to move forward. Um, the obstacles at that point took me longer to get through, but my inner heart was always that voice of like, you can do it, you can do it. And it was really following that inner voice of where I wanted to be. Um, so the main obstacles I would say was worry to spend money. I saw what it did to my family. I saw what it did in my community between like having a spouse and all of those things. And spending on things versus doing it yourself. That was a huge, that was the biggest step in my career about 5 years ago, when I took bigger steps to really grow the company and hire a writer, hire a coach, more contractors, and really just I call it my support squad, because without them, the company would not be where they are. So it seems scary, but when you take one step, that is your beginning and that is your information. I used to think that when you take those steps, it was like, oh my God, let me take back if something was wrong, but that was your information. Now I look back and it's like, that's my information that created the road of where I am today to know what wasn't working and what does work so that when I wake up every day, it's to a business and work that I love to do, um, and that I'm really deeply passionate about.
I knew this was going to be so great to talk to you because in the book we talk about I have this thing where I have this adversity to comfort, right? When my life starts really feeling comfortable, and it's not from a good place. I'm not saying this in a good way. Like I have anxiety, right? And so when things get really comfortable for me, I start to worry. I'm like, oh boy, what's around the corner? Oh, this, something's going to happen, right? Or something along those lines. And so what I have a tendency to do in my life, which by default has been good, I don't know why, but is that I always try to go for things that are uncomfortable, but that's where I grow. That's where people seem to grow is like when you're most uncomfortable. So to talk a little bit about that, I want to go a little bit deeper on that feeling of waking up and taking those uncomfortable steps that you did to scale and grow your business and who you are.
So I love how you put all of that because that's really exactly how it is. And at the beginning, especially in the accounting field, that's what you're trained to think is to staying in the comfortable and like staying in your budget. And I'm not here telling you that you shouldn't stay in your budget, but there are times that because you know your numbers, that you can press your budget to do things. And I'll give you some bad examples of that. But the best way that I did it was being led by somebody who did it,
Love that. Love
or
that.
admiring someone who did it and following in their path, being in masterminds and being the not smartest person in the room and being surrounded by people who are way smarter than you, or just way more knowledgeable because of their time, not necessarily saying smart means that you're not a smart person, but where
Yeah.
they are, they just have those years on you that
Yeah.
you
They
don't.
just spit in more scraps and fights, right?
Yeah, they got more scrappy than you did at that point. And that was really the step. And also, when you have that support of somebody who did it, where they have their blueprint, what happens is that um, they're there to talk about it with you.
Mm,
And a horrible thing I used to do was to keep it in. And when you keep it in, there's no progressment. And that
yeah.
was a harsh lesson that I've learned. And then once that really clicked into me, that the more I talk about it, the better the results come. It also comes quicker, the better my vision becomes of my company. Now, it's easy for me to say, like, hey, do it with a support squad and hire somebody and all these things. But you also have to hire your gut. And I say hire your gut
Mm,
because it's trust your gut that that is your path. And, when you start to train that muscle and make it stronger, it just goes easier and easier. So it's like if you think about it, and I give this example a lot of like, that 1% change. If you just did one thing different every single month, that's 12% change a year, and you're just way ahead of the curve with everyone else. So you
love
just do
that.
it one thing at a time.
So it's so great because you're talking about another concept we have in the book, which is CEOs, and you know this so well, being with your technical background. Well, first thing I want to let people know, Margo is being very modest. She has a very very successful company, and so we were talking about it beforehand. So maybe just real quick, Margo. I mean, what are some accolades about your company right now, just to share people for context? I mean, you've worked your butt off, so tell us a little bit about how the company's doing. Doing okay?
Yeah. So thank God my company this year was rated top 3 in New York. And I can cry just saying it because it's not something at all I ever imagined.
Right.
I was within the top 18 for the previous 3 years, I think it was, which I think I was around 10, which is still awesome. But then when I got the news of top three, it just, it's really life changing that, when you put your mind to something that you really can accomplish anything. Now, I don't have a CPA. I have a CPA background. I study a lot of tax. I did start off as a bookkeeper. I moved up to an accountant. And how did I do this? By having a lot of mentors and a lot of different masterminds of trainings that I advanced. And that for me was the better road than necessarily going back to school.
Yeah.
And now I actually just made the decision I am going to go for my EA, which is an enrolled agent. I'm looking in the next 2 years to add tax to the practice. So many different things keep coming through the door. So it's like, it's time.
So
Um,
let's talk about, so then let's, because no journey goes alone, right? And you touched on it before, that you got to where you are by surrounding yourself with people lifting you up, people pouring into you, you pouring into them. Let's talk a little bit about, you talked about hiring on gut and those kind of things. Maybe what can you share? Someone's listening to this, they feel alone, they've started a business, they're solo right now, or they, want to go out and do something, or even they're an individual contributor. Talk a little bit about the people around us and who we surround ourselves with. What's some advice for those listening?
I would say the first step is to take notice of what's around you. You know, um, it's really to notice is if the person is bringing you more down than more positive in moving forward. I never used to really understand about moving forward so easily. I used to focus like on a lot of details of what was. And what I'm gonna say is like you use that, instead of focusing on the details, you just transfer that into information so that you can move forward. Now, when you surround yourself with people that are higher than you in terms of knowledge, you could emulate them and you can be like, wow, she did this and she did that. She's still standing every day, even though she had life transitions and all these things. That guy got
Mhm.
back up, even though somebody was really nasty to him and said a really not nice, I don't want to say colorful words, comment to him, and he got back up, and he's able to do all of these things. So when you start to emulate people and you see yourself like going in that direction and it just keeps on coming back, that is something to consider to get into. Like my first coach that I hired, I just kept emulating him and I just kept on like gravitating to everything that he said. And any video or blog, like I would hit refresh constantly because I was like it was like a thirst for more, and generally, girls are like diamonds and all these things. And for me, it was more about my career, and that was my passion. So when you see yourself really gravitating towards things and like it just keeps landing in your head, that is something to just consider and be like, okay, maybe that person is something that to have. But if you come back with feelings of down and negativity and shame is a huge one, those are not people. You want your top three, or I think it's top five, to be people that are really, out there and done that. It's like if you go on any social media platform, or if you just talk to your friends, depending on what field you're in, find people that are doing it and just build a relationship. And you're listening to this and you're probably like, just build a relationship. I'm so timid. I'm so ashamed. You know, create a message on a Word document and just, talk it out. Look at the mirror and, practice it where you're in a room by yourself, because relationships are the number one thing that really helps you. And relationships with people that you want to emulate is really going to create growth beyond any 7-step funnel or any, box type system that your income could grow over. Because in a pandemic, none of that stuff works. What works is a relationship and people that you emulate.
Yeah, I love that you said that too, because, I mean, there's a place for systems, and coming from an accountant, I love this. There's a place for systems, but you put on top of systems what's more important, which is the relationships, right? I mean, it's just like, me reaching out for you for this podcast too. I spent a little time to try and get to know you from written and, some other things that I saw, but it's still important to take the step to get to know somebody. And that, and that's what I'm, learning again through this podcast is, I'm meeting so many wonderful people, and there's so many great stories. If we would just take the time to connect with more positive, right? So let's talk about that negative, because we talked a little bit about this before we started recording. So, and you said you got some good stories for it. Is another concept in the book is, especially in a service-based business, is in growing a business, you have to learn to love no, right? Because if you say yes to everything and everyone, you're gonna fall apart, because there are plenty of people out there that are takers that want to just take from you and or whatever. So talk a little bit about learning to love no. How was that journey for you and your business and your growth, and as a person and as a businesswoman?
So as an accountant at the beginning, I did take whatever I can get, but it felt gross and it felt horrible all the time.
Mm,
And I would get suffocated by the feeling of stuff that I did love, but I couldn't go after it because something else was in the way. And then just one day, like the tolerance didn't last anymore. And I was like, I'm going to do it. And one of my coaches said this, and I translated, I made this into my own mantra, which is like, no is a full sentence. And,
oh,
and some,
boom.
and ever feel like you're paying expenses that you don't want to do, or something happened that you had to pay and that you didn't want to do. And this is going to sound foo-foo or like, a little bit crazy, but when it's not meant to be with a relationship, all of a sudden crazy stuff happens that
Mhm.
takes that money anyway. And when you start to realize that that's all that's happening, you're like, hey, something is not right. And then you dip into yourself, and then you're kind of like, why isn't it right? And it's what's not resonating. And then it's generally right next to a belief that is saying, like, this is the way it's supposed to be. This is the way it's supposed to be. You should be doing this. This is the way it should be. And just shutting all over yourself. But when you break out of that and you start to go into like a natural creative flow, it just happens so much more. Creating your no client and who you don't want to serve is more important than your ideal client. And here I am
Wow.
saying it on a podcast, where
Wow.
and everything is about, your ideal client. You want to know who you don't want to serve. Because
Mhm.
when those red flags come on, you want to be like, hey, this is not for me. And I'm actually going to share a great story. Um, Recently, a man hired me, and he was going through crazy amount of stuff. He was going through, his wife divorced him, um, and he had pile ups, and let's just call it like a 20 car backup of 5 years of tax returns that was really just hitting him in the head, like in his jaw, because he handed the government records of numbers. So a CPA went out there and he did the tax returns. So it wasn't proper bookkeeping. So it was mountains of stuff. He had warrants after him. He had all of these things. But what happens when we would get on the call, because of all his frustration, he would be yelling at me all the time. Now, back in the day, probably about 10 years ago, not 5 years ago, yeah, even within the last 5 to 10 years, I would have tolerated it. And at the beginning, I did a little bit to see if it was going to calm down, and it didn't. Every conversation got greater and greater and greater. He doesn't have a wife, and he wasn't going to therapy. And this is not judging. But what happens is that the no client generally stems from when you have self-respect, you're not going to tolerate anything that doesn't work for you. So it all begins within of what
Yes.
you want to create in the world. And when you
Right.
create from yourself, from within, it starts to flow easier. And this is not something, if you got, when you guys are listening to this, to pressure yourself. It builds over time. Like your
Right.
no client, like if you have a double screen, like I'm being real here. It's like I had a no and a yes client like on each screen, like to really, to measure
Right.
it out, because my energy is going into it every day. This is the
Right.
blood that feeds my children, and
Yep.
this is my time away from them, and I take it very seriously. And like he said, living the life of, like you said, the living the life of the CEO. I model this to my children.
Hmm.
My 18-year-old, he does have his own business. He is in computers, and
Of course
he
he
and
does.
I, he can make his own money.
Yeah.
And this is something we've started the past few years, and he's graduating and he's able to. And he had friends at first that were making more money than him and big money, but he appreciated what he was doing, that it was his. And he
Right.
and it was just his. Like, I can say
Sure.
different things, but at the end of the day, it was his. And my daughter is
Right.
still in the trainings of it, and she wants it. And I can't say this enough. It's like, so when I fired that client, actually, I want to get back to that. He didn't take it too well. And the first thing he darted at me was because I'm not a CPA. And,
Mm.
you know, he would start to dart at me also because I was a woman. And those are the two big things at life that were like my jawbreakers in my
Hmm.
career. And now they don't take me down. They just make me feel like I have to have more compassion for him. And
Right.
then, he threw some stuff back at me. But when those types of things happen, you just have to, take it back and just be like, is that working for me? And follow your heart.
Yeah.
Follow your heart. And if you want to figure out where that is, put your hands on your heart and be like,
I love how you unpack that because because I went into a commission business for the last 13 years, right? So before I started my company, and then that was a different profit center. But when I jumped into a commission business was 2007 and 8 in real estate, and that's when everything went bust, and I was going broke, and you know I was having to say yes to everything. So I was saying yes, but what I then realized is I also was saying to a yes of a lot of just bird dogging assignments that were never going to make me any money or never do anything. And so I had to go through that though to find that ideal client. And I love
right.
that you know, at first you should taste a lot of different things to understand what your ideal is. And I love how you worked through that and you made that happen for you to where you can say no now. And also saying no, right? And I want to get your thoughts on this. Saying no to someone may also be better for them, right? Because maybe you're not a match.
So just to, tag on what you said first, actually, for your first $50,000, you definitely have to work through, depending on where you are in your income. And I say 50,000 because that's like an average salary that you can decently live, pay rent, and all these things. Take what you can get, and I'll tell you, if you have to get scrappy for money, do that. But what also happens is that when you say yes to the wrong things, it takes up space of you building the right thing.
Mm.
So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm actually just sitting and unpacking that because I've never had really anyone put it so succinctly and wonderfully. So if you're listening to this on 1.5 times speed, put it on 1 time speed, go back and listen to what she just said. It's okay for you to say yes to everything for that first 50,000. That makes a
And I
lot of
say
sense.
that as a CFO,
Right.
because you got to pay your bills, right?
Right.
At
It's a
the end of the day,
reality.
nobody else is paying your utilities. Nobody's paying your rent. You got to eat every day. And I'm saying that. And I've been in those situations, but also use that as your story and your path to find out your yes client and your no client. Create your
Hmm.
information, create your gold throughout
Yeah.
that time.
Yeah, no, that's so, man, boy, we could just spend hours talking about that. There's so
Right.
much to talk about there. But, so we're just about over. We're just about at our 30 minutes, and I try to give a hard stop as people are listening and also respect your time, Margo. As we kind of wrap this up, and I know we're going to be coming back, and I'm going to be talking to you again at some point, but
I love
I hope
that.
you come back on the show.
Yeah.
Um, what right now are you seeing? And so because I think this is probably really critical. One is you're in New York, one you're touching people's money all the time and seeing their lives and what people are going through. What advice would you have for people right now? Not tax or accounting wise, but what would you suggest to people right now that are feeling a lot of pressure? What's Margot's advice right now?
My advice is pay attention to your well being at all times. It's really taking care of your health, because if you're taking care of a situation and pressure, nothing good comes of it. If you are from a calm place and you're grounded, which is stuff like meditation, going into nature, going for a walk, music, those types of things, that's what's going to help you get grounded. That's where you can make decisions. And when you make decisions from that place, better things come from it. And it's okay to rewind to to go forward for your future. But have patience with yourself, have compassion for yourself that where you are, you're still standing, you're alive, you're healthy, you're breathing, you're moving. Movement is
Right.
huge. So paying attention to your well-being and having patience and compassion, it is just so key. Everything else flows. Your creativity is going to flow, and that's all natural. It's not forceful. It's not injected with any extra cortisone and all these different things that
Mhm.
people do for it. You're creating a natural path that you can regulate yourself. And if something doesn't feel good, don't do it. Wait till it does feel good. But if your body is like in shivers, don't do it.
Yeah.
Wait and have a conversation with somebody that can support you to take one step. Don't take 10 steps, take one, and it's
Mhm.
going to flow.
Y'all, the folks that are listening to this, that's real CEO, CFO talk from Margo today. Margo, we talked about obstacles, we talked about journeys, we talked about just starting, we talked about those shareholders that we have in our lives, about how to say and learn to love no. I love no is a full sentence, and I hope it's okay that I use that from time to time.
It's
That's
all yours.
fantastic. That's fantastic. And we also heard about taking care of ourselves. I mean, what a way to wrap up an episode. I'm so happy that we got a chance to connect and talk and share your message with people. So anyone that's listening, I'm going to link information on how to get in touch with Margo either above or below, wherever you're watching or listening to this. Every guest that I have on the show they're real people. They are available. They're willing to connect. They're givers. So don't let this just live in your ears, your eyes. Go and connect with these people. They're great, wonderful people. And Margo, thank you for your time.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
That's great. Well, everybody, thanks for listening to this episode of the CEO for Life Experience podcast and vlog. We'll see you on the next episode. And I know Margo will be back. Thanks, Margo.
You're so welcome. Can you